My name is Tiago Forte, and this is Wellbeing Meets the Quantified Self. About a year ago, my client started asking me a very simple but very unsettling question. How do you know this works for me? It's unsettling for anyone who gives advice for a living, trainers, coaches, yoga instructors, doctors. And it's unsettling because so often we don't know. We know what works for many people or most people, but not for you. I'm a productivity coach and consultant, and this question has made me realize that my role needs to fundamentally change, just as the nature of productivity is fundamentally changing. I believe we're in the midst of a very important transition from Productivity 1.0, created for the industrial and service economy, to Productivity 2.0, created for the information age. We're moving from focusing on raw output to considering all aspects of a person's well-being. From random productivity tips and hacks to integrated strategies based on solid principles. From process thinking, which is predictable and orderly, to systems thinking, where every part affects every other part. From self-discipline, trying to get everyone to work as long and as hard as possible, to self-awareness, where each of us is responsible for discovering our own talents and our own strengths. Productivity 1.0 can be described as collected good advice. And in an age before Google, this was enough, but it's not enough anymore. Productivity 2.0, the way I see it, is about framing your problems in the context of a system that can be optimized through small experiments. So let's break this down. First of all, framing whose problems? Your problems. Not mine, not what I imagine yours to be, not the problems of an imaginary person. And notice that I don't say productivity problems. If we define productivity very broadly as the effectiveness of all human endeavors, then really nothing is out of scope. Sometimes we spend a lot of time talking about high-minded abstract principles, when really the problem is very basic. More sleep, more water, less stress. Next is we're focused on a system. Once you have a system, even if it's imperfect, even if it's very basic, you can separate the system from yourself. Once it's separate from you, it can be evaluated, it can be analyzed, it can be measured, and ultimately it can be optimized. But how exactly we optimize it is very important. It's not by hearing the right answers from the experts. The nature of our work is changing way too fast for that. Also, it's not through big experiments. We don't have the budget, the time, or the risk tolerance for high-stakes experiments. It's small experiments that can be done cheaply, quickly, and on the level of an individual person. And if I can include a shameless plug here, I'm going to be running a 2-day pilot course in July, leading a small group of people through the process of creating exactly such a system. In this training, we're going to combine principles from design thinking, interaction design, and behavioral science with technology to explore what Productivity 2.0 could really look like on a day-to-day basis. So I'm going to spend the rest of my time today talking about these small experiments because, lucky for us, there already exists a framework and a movement for conducting these experiments. We don't have to start from scratch. This movement is called the Quantified Self. The Quantified Self, also known as self-tracking, refers to keeping track of some aspect of your life with the goal of understanding or improving it. Now, as humans, we've always done this. But this movement has grown a lot in the past few years because many of the tools and methods are becoming accessible for the first time. We all have powerful computers in our pockets all the time. Sensors are falling in cost, and cloud computing is everywhere. Some of the more common things to track are activity, like steps taken in a day, diet, counting calories, sleep, mood throughout the day or throughout the week, time spent on different projects or different tasks, and spending via a service like Mint.com. But now there's also more unusual things that we can track. Blood markers, UV exposure, physical arousal via galvanic skin response or heart rate variability, location using the GPS on our phones, or what we spend time on the computer. More and more we are using the devices that surround us to give us information about our environment and about our behaviors. But we're here to talk about well-being, right? What does well-being have to do with something like Quantified Self? Well, the way I see it, well-being is still stuck firmly in the 1.0 phase. I believe that Quantified Self has the potential to bring well-being into the next phase, the same way it's done with productivity. How can it do that exactly? Well, I think we have to take a few steps back and look at how we think about technology. So often we think of technology in terms of extending our physical senses, our external senses, helping us hear, see, and touch things that don't actually exist or things that are far away. But what about our internal senses, our internal self-awareness? It's funny because it's becoming more and more clear that self-awareness is not only necessary for productivity, but it's essentially the basis for happiness and a successful life in all areas. And yet we struggle to define it and to explain how to get it. I'd like to propose a different way of thinking about self-awareness. What if it wasn't this vague, fuzzy, monolithic thing that we can't really explain? What if we thought of it instead in terms of a set of internal skills, or a set of different types of self-awareness? This includes physiological things like your stress level from moment to moment, your hydration level, how much energy you have and what type of energy that is. But also deeper things. Are you feeling lonely? How much time have you spent on a certain project or a certain task? Are your relationships healthy? What is the priority of what you're working on right now? All the way down to the most important types of self-awareness. How happy are you? What makes you happy and why? Are you mindful? What is the bigger purpose you're working towards, and are your day-to-day actions in line with that? These are all forms of self-awareness that we all have to a certain degree, but I believe that they and many others can be strengthened, can be sharpened using some of the new tools that we have available. So you're probably wondering, how exactly is that? In one word, biofeedback. I remember as a kid or a teenager, my first magazine subscription was to Popular Science. And I remember years ago reading about some fascinating experiments with biofeedback. People, after just a few hours or days of training, were able to learn to consciously control their perspiration, their heart rate, their blood pressure. I even saw one recently where people were put in an MRI scanner and shown an animation of a fire, and the intensity of the fire corresponded to activity in the pain regions of their brain. And they were able to pretty quickly learn to consciously lower their experience of their own pain. This is some powerful stuff. Up until now, the tools and the knowledge required was not very accessible. But these days, we all have access to everything we need to conduct our own biofeedback experiments. Now I'd like to give you a few concrete examples. Now, I didn't choose the most impressive or technologically advanced examples. I chose actually personal examples, almost mundane examples, because I wanted you to hear from me, from the source, how meaningful they have been to me. I recently got an intelligent water bottle called a HydroCoach. The bottle has a mechanism in the straw that measures how much you drink and keeps track of your daily water intake. Now, on the face of it, it's kind of ridiculous, actually. I mean, what am I going to do? Only drink from this one water bottle, take it everywhere I go the rest of my life? The computer actually doesn't even store more than 24 hours of data at a time. But let me tell you, there's something really powerful about taking a sip and seeing the meter go up 1%. My target is 75 ounces a day, and each sip is 1%, so I know that each sip is about 0.75 ounces. What this means is that instead of 8 cups, which is kind of hard to measure and keep track of, I know that each day all I have to do is take 100 sips. In practice, I've learned that if I reach about 70% of my goal, I receive most of the good effects. So really, I just need to take 35 sips in the morning and 35 sips in the afternoon. Easy. I imagine soon that I'll stop using the HydroCoach, but I'll keep with me a greater awareness of how much water I drink, how much I need to drink, and how it feels to be hydrated. This is an example that many people have experience with. Exercise tracking apps such as Runkeeper will tell you each mile as you run how far you've gone and what your pace is. And what I've noticed as I use it over time is that I can feel the difference between an 11-minute mile, a 10-minute mile, a 9-minute mile. These numbers that before were pretty meaningless to me, because of this form of biofeedback, I now have a sense of what pace I'm running at, even if I'm not using the app. And the third example is a research project called trackyourhappiness.org from a research team at Harvard. Over the course of about a month, the system sends you 3 text messages per day at random times of the day. Each time, you're asked to respond to 5 to 7 questions about where you are, what you're doing, various other factors, and how happy you are. At the end of the collection period, they send you a report that categorizes your happiness in the moment according to a variety of factors, such as what you were doing, how productive you were, who you were talking with, and where you were. Now, I don't have time to get into the details of this experiment, but I will tell you it's been a goldmine of insights and further questions to explore. Even without looking at this data, the experience of being asked a few times a day what I'm doing, how I feel, how happy I am, has really strengthened my own self-awareness of what makes me happy and why. I really encourage you to go to trackyourhappiness.org and sign up and try for yourself. It's been interesting for me to see the rise of activity tracker fatigue. Some of the hype is dying down, and there's a lot of criticism out there that these devices are too expensive, not well designed, not something that people wear for a long time. It's been called the dirty little secret of activity trackers. In a study, Endeavor Partners found that over time, more than 50% of people that buy an activity tracker stop wearing it. But actually, I think that these criticisms completely miss the point of what self-tracking devices are about. They're not supposed to be prosthetic implants that we wear forever. Basically, they're supposed to be biofeedback training wheels. These are training devices that we use for a time. We use them to develop a skill or an awareness of something in our environment or something about our behavior. And then when we have that skill or that awareness, we can set it aside. I think this is a much more realistic vision of what Quantified Self can provide us in terms of insights about ourselves. If you'd like to know more about Quantified Self, I've put together a brief primer with some of the best sites and links on the topic, and you can see that at this link. Also, feel free to contact me on Twitter or by email if you're interested in talking more. Thank you.